Human nature, in itself, is completely neutral in its core, as is the case with the human creational spirit form. In contrast to the spirit form, however, human nature is formed by two components, namely the negative and the positive. While the form of the spirit does not contain the positive and the negative, but only the neutral positive equalizedness and the harmonious, whereby the spirit form of the human being, like the creation and the pure spirit forms themselves, is only able to absorb and process that which is of neutral positive equalizedness and harmonious, which leads to a purely neutral positive evolution. In contrast to this is human nature, whose core is formed in negative and positive, whereby the human being is able to act in one wise or another, because his or her will is also free to do, and not do, as it accords to his or her own state of mind. This means that the human being can form his or her thoughts and feelings, as well as their activities and deeds both negatively and positively, and indeed through their own will, through their own decisions, opinions and ideas, as well as according to their own disposition and assessment, etc. Thus, the human being forms, out of his or her nature, which is neutral in its core, and which contains the positive and negative components, which are also neutral in themselves, his or her inner and outer being, and thus the personality, which is also identical with the consciousness of a human material nature. The positive and negative components, which are neutral in themselves, correspond to dormant energies which only acquire effective power through the human's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and through his or her activities and deeds, and thus produce very specific negative or positive effects, which in turn manifest themselves in the form of thoughts, emotions, actions, and the entire work. Thus it follows that the human being determines everything negative and positive himself or herself through their own will. Since freedom of will is given to them, and they build up the neutral negative positive energies themselves to negative or positive effect and bring them to bear. This means, however, that the human being is responsible for all of his or her thoughts, feelings and emotions, as well as for all his activities and deeds themselves. Consequently, no higher power is responsible for them, as well as not fellow human beings or situations, events and experiences, etc., if they are effects and phenomena, etc., caused by themselves, if they therefore consciously or unconsciously determine the cause and effect of their thoughts, feelings, emotions, as well as their activities and deeds themselves. Even before birth, the developing human being possesses the potential of his or her human nature, and thus also the neutral energies of the negative and the positive. But there is also the neutral positive equalized potential of the energies of the spirit form, which contains the creational spirit being in its purest essence. And this potential is basically what the human being should recognize and strive for, whereby the potential of human nature, that is to say its negative and positive energies, should be used progressively in balance and harmony, and thus in a creational law-based sense. If this happens, then the whole thing forms a valuable basis for a genuine and healthy self-confidence. which enables the human being to survive even in the most difficult situations of life, and thus to overcome and master even the most difficult psychological difficulties. However, if the creational spirit potential of the spirit form is not recognized and not strived for, nor the potential of human nature and its core, then the human being tends, out of his or her own conscious or unconscious endeavor, to turn solely to that which is negative or to the negative degenerations, to every situation and life, etc., to see only negatively, and accordingly to lead a way of life which consists only of failures or of melancholy, hatred, lack of love, joylessness, visions of doom and gloom and other evils through which the human being enters his or her own captivity by themselves, from which they can no longer free themselves without outside help and a clear, rational thinking, whereby the clear and rational thinking, however, is rarely still found and brought into application. In this situation, the human being usually does not view his or her situation from a larger and healthier perspective. Consequently, they are not able to recognize and accept, because they do not want to be detached from the negative, that everything and everyone, and thus also the negative, has certain positive aspects. All things of life and all existence are always relative, and thus not final, nor do they exist in perfection. For this reason, every cause and effect, as well as every event, every situation and everything, etc., must be viewed from different angles. This leads to the realization that not only problems with one's own person, etc., break in. Because if the view of everything is expanded and everything is perceived truthfully, and not only superficially, then the facts are recognized correctly, from which then also the understanding arises that not only one's own personality faces problems that relate to a certain thing or to several of them, but that, by far, many other humans still have to bear the same or even more difficult and heavier burdens and problems to overcome. The realization therefore shows that the personal situation is not unique, but that other humans have to struggle with the same wrong and with the same agonies, deprivations, efforts, pains, suffering, anguish, tribulations, unsatisfactoriness, oppression, burden, toil, hardship, worry, distress, trepidation, poverty, grief and affliction, as well as with the same sorrow, the same oppression and misery, and with the same need, dejection, depression, melancholy, and with many other evils. So there is no human being in the world who alone is unhappy, and whose condition and situation, etc., would be unique and completely hopeless compared to others. Because everyone has their fate in their own hands. Because everyone determines and forms it themselves, insofar as everything goes right, and the human being perceives and exercises his or her self-responsibility.
Regensdorf, CH, Saturday, 3rd February 1951, 13:22 hours. Edward, 14 years old.